In the last video on our Pigeonrat upgrades here, we successfully got the engine started with the two wiring harnesses put together. Woohoo! Now it's time to build up the front end so that we can clean up this mess and have some place to mount our fenders and attach the rest of our wires and get everything cleaned up and out of the way. Before we go too much further cleaning up the engine bay here, we need to get our headers mounted. We've got to get these on so that we can actually run the engine for a little bit longer without having to worry about burning anything up under here. Plus the packaging of everything. We want to make sure that we can get the headers on and that we can get them in and out without it being a royal pain in the butt. All right, we've got our headers fitted in place here, attached to the block, and weren't really worried about these not fitting because they were in this same frame before, but there is some changes because of the new accessories. Right here on this bolt was interfering with the header, so we had to clearance this just a bit right there so that we could fit the header in on this passenger side. And over here on the driver's side, although it looks like it's a little cleaner, we actually have a different dipstick tube than was on here before. So the dipstick tube that runs right here actually made it so that we couldn't put the headers on with the exhaust studs in place. So we had to pull those two and then put the header on and then put the exhaust studs back in. It's not a huge deal, but it does make it a bit of a pain in the butt when if we need to pull these on and off. If we get a chance, we may change out this dipstick tube for a different style that may solve that problem. Now that we made sure that everything fits the way we want it to, we're going to pull the headers back off and start working on the collectors and how we're going to attach it to the rest of the exhaust system. So the headers are here on the table, and you can see these extensions here are too short to put an O2 bung. You want to get them a couple of inches away from where the collector comes together so that you're getting a good reading. And I also want to have a V-band clamp here so that I can take the whole thing apart if I need to bring it back out. The way it was before, these were all welded together and there was basically no way to remove the headers without cutting it apart. Well, I don't want that to be the case anymore. In order to extend these, we need to fix this up. But we're going to be switching to 2.5-inch exhaust. These tubes are only 2-inch, and we're switching to 2.5 because luckily our good friend Mike gave us a whole bunch of 2.5-inch tube. We've got all this mandrel bent tube ready to go, a bunch more back here. So thanks to him, we're going to have 2.5-inch exhaust. So we're going to be cutting these 2-inch tubes off, and we're going to be replacing it with 2-inch pipe right here, and that's going to give us better flowing exhaust and also give us a long enough piece here to have a spot to weld our O2 bung. with the headers back in, I can mark where I want to put the O2 sensor. Obviously it needs to be on the upside, but I don't want it to hit anything. So I'm thinking right about there. It's our best angle. Okay, pulled the headers back out after marking the spot for the O2 sensors. That one's going to sit about right there. This one will sit about right there. So it's time to cut these headers new bunghole. Now that we've got the bungs welded into the headers and we have the V-band adapters tacked on, we can start building our Y-pipe. So the first thing to do is cut down a bend here and start fitting it up to a straight piece to see how that's going to go together. Shit. How did I get that in there before? Well, shit.
Three hours later.
Okay. All right, we have our crossover pipe built. As you saw, it didn't quite fit up in it. Well, actually, it fit just fine, but we couldn't get it out without loosening the driver's side header, which is not ideal. We don't want to have to loosen that up every time we want to pull this. Luckily, just shortening up this end was able to give us enough room to finagle it out of there. Put a flex tube or flex piece in here. I wouldn't normally have considered that, but this is the stock one, and you can see there's a flex piece in that. Looking at that, I started thinking that was a really good idea because that takes some of the pressure off of the headers, so they're not, you don't have to pull them in or out or anything like that, and hopefully that'll make sure that our exhaust gaskets last a little longer. Anyway, we'll get this thing fully welded up and move on to the next section, and hopefully the rest of it goes smoother. This took a while. All right, we have our headers and our cross tube all put together, fully welded. Everything fits. We can actually get the cross tube in and out, which is a nice bonus. But before we do the final installation of this stuff, I want to leak test it. Make sure that my welds are actually good and holding. So you can see I've got some plugs in the ends here in a couple of spots, and this is a cone. It's got a little hose that goes into it, so you can pop that into pretty much any size hole and pump a little air in there. This is for a smoke kit that's actually supposed to blow in smoke, so you can see the smoke coming out. I didn't want to spend the money for that. This was like under 10 bucks, and all these plugs was just over 10 bucks. So I'm not into this very much. I don't build a lot of exhaust systems, so I don't need the whole fancy setup. I don't want to spend a couple $100 on that. But using this, I already tested it on this and found a leak already. I'm just using regular hose here. I've got it regulated down to less than 5 PSI, so I don't just blow the plugs out. But it seems to be working. I was able to hear one leak, and so I'm going to start patching that up, and we'll just listen to see if we hear any more. We'll probably hit it with a little water, see if we see any bubbles like you would with a tire, and hopefully we can get this thing leak free without spending a whole bunch more money. So let's get this leak fixed. All right, we just got through testing the second of our headers, and no leaks in either one of the headers. So that's good news. Means my welding is holding up. We did find 2 leaks in the cross pipe, but they're simple to find, easy to fix, and now that's leak free as well. So that's some nice peace of mind for a couple of bucks that these 3 pieces are leak free. Let's get these bolted back in place. All right, the rest of our exhaust is now complete. We built this as two separate pieces just to make it easy to get in and out with all the cross members and fitting it up nice and tight over the rear axle and around the gas tank. I just didn't think there was a way that we could actually get this out without splitting it. So split it right here behind the muffler, but otherwise it's done and ready to go. So let's get this put back in. We'll weld on some hangers so that we can lower the car, and then we can see how this thing sounds through our new exhaust. Well, that sounded pretty damn good to me. Way better than it sounded before, for sure. So with that, the exhaust work is done. Next up, we'll be tackling the rest of this so that we can get this thing drivable again. Now that we've got the bung holes